Greetings, everyone. We are Group 11, composed of Isabel Bautista, Miguel Fiel, and Sean Sabroso. Today, we will be talking about ideology. According to Haywood, the first problem encountered in discussing the nature of ideology is the fact that there is no agreed definition of the term, only a collection of rival definitions. With this, McClellan posits that ideology is the most elusive concept in the whole of the social sciences. In line with this, it is important to note that definitions therefore do not serve as introductions to the study of ideology, but a mere preliminary formality as they are already ideological per se. Despite of this, we will still provide different definitions of ideology and a working definition. As we have established earlier, there is no agreed definition of ideology, but there are many definitions attached to the term, such as, according to Haywood, it is a political belief system, it is an action-oriented set of political ideas, it is officially sanctioned set of ideas used to legitimize a political system of regime, it is a more or less coherent set of ideas that provides the basis for organized political action, whether this is intended to preserve, modify, or overthrow the existing system of power, and it consists of ideas that situate the individual within a social context and generate a sense of collective belonging. On the other hand, according to Ball, Dagger, and O'Neill, it is a fairly coherent and comprehensive set of ideas that explains and evaluates social conditions, helps people understand their place in society, and provides a program for social and political action. In his essay on ideology in the interpretation of cultures, Gertz criticizes and dismisses the Marxist view of ideology as false consciousness or the expression of political interests and proposes for a broader understanding of ideology as a symbolic system which allows individuals to orient themselves in relation to their social world. For Gertz, ideology is a form of cognitive mapping which emerges into being at a point where traditional or taken for granted values and motives break down, and at such points of historical crisis, ideology at hand becomes a set of rhetorical or suasive discourses to provide men and women with an alternative, more conscious understanding of the social order and their place within it. Martin Seliger also defined ideology as a set of ideas by which men posit, explain, and justify the ends and means of organized social action, irrespective of whether such action aims to preserve, amend, uproot, or rebuild a given order. Therefore, ideology is an action-oriented system of thought. Based on this definition, it is said that ideologies are neither good nor bad, true nor false, open nor closed, liberating nor oppressive. They can be all these things. From these definitions, we could see that the keywords political belief system, action-oriented set of political ideas, a set of ideas that provide political or social action, are recurring in the definitions provided by Hayward, Ball et al. And Seliger, whereas Gert's definition of ideology, a symbolic system which allows individuals to orient themselves in relation to their social world, is in line with one of Hayward's definition of ideology as a set of ideas that situate the individual within a social context and generate a sense of collective belonging, which also overlaps with Ball, Dagger, and O'Neill's definition that an ideology helps people understand their place in society. Lifting from these overlapping keywords, we will consider Ball, Dagger, and O'Neill's and Gert's definition of ideology as one working definition. Therefore, an ideology is a fairly coherent and comprehensive set of ideas that explains and evaluates social conditions, helps people understand their place in society, and provides a program for social and political action, and a symbolic system which allows individuals to orient themselves in relation to their social world. Based on this working definition as well as all the other definitions attached to the term, the elements of the concept of ideology are as follows. First, it consists of ideas, beliefs, understandings, and attitudes. Second, it takes the form of a system or pattern which is more or less coherent. Third, it is concerned with society, man, and his place in the world, and therefore it is persuasive and seeks to argue a case in order to convince. Fourth, it contains statements of fact or statements which are held to be factual and statements of a normative character expressing morals, values, among others. Lastly, it is associated with a particular group, class, or collectivity within the wider society and with society itself. Now that we have finally established ideology, its definition, and its elements, we can now move on to the different understandings of the term across different fields. Within the field of sociology, ideology is broadly understood to refer to the sum total of a person's values, beliefs, assumptions, and expectations. It exists between people, within groups, and therefore within society. Furthermore, it shapes our thoughts, actions, and interactions along with what happens in society at large. In a political view, ideology is seen as a certain set of ethical ideals, principles, doctrines, myths, or symbols of a social movement, institution, class, or large group that explains how society would work and offers some political and cultural blueprint for a certain social order. According to Susser, ideology is an umbrella term that simultaneously refers to numerous levels of political discourse. But first, let's define discourse and differentiate political discourse from critical discourse. In linguistics, discourse refers to a unit of language longer than a single sentence. It refers to the way conversations flow. Moreover, it can be used to refer to particular contexts of language use. Political discourse and critical discourse are some examples. Political discourse refers to the discourse practices engaged in by all actors from politicians and organizations to citizens in a political process, while critical discourse explores the connection between the use of language and the social and political context in which it occurs. Issues explored include gender, ethnicity, cultural difference, ideology, and identity, among others. With that, there are four levels of ideological discourse. The first is operational. At one level, ideology serves to direct political leaders in their choice of concrete policies and practices, or what are often spoken of as operational codes. The second level is called philosophical, where it forms the basis for the way we socialize children. The third level is called mobilizing. It is appealed to in order to mobilize a populace to action or sacrifice. And the last level is called propagandistic, as it serves the more mundane need of transforming coercion into legitimate authority. Each level has its own unique intellectual substance and style. Arguments formulated in the philosophical mode will be profoundly different from calls to action made at the political rally or from the presentation of civic ideas to school children. It also has its own standards of success and failure. What succeeds in speaking to the social theories will not be effective for mass audiences and vice versa. Despite the lack of an agreed definition of the term, the origins of the term are nevertheless clear. The word ideology was coined during the French Revolution by Antoine de Tracy and was first used in public in 1796. For him, ideology referred to a new science of ideas, literally an ideology. He even believed that it was possible to objectively uncover the origins of ideas and even proclaimed that this new science would come to enjoy the same status as established sciences such as biology and zoology. However, despite these high expectations, this original meaning of the term has had little impact on later usage, which has been influenced by both Marxist and non-Marxist thinking. The career of ideology as a key political term stems from the use made of it in the writings of Karl Marx. Marx's concept of ideology has a number of crucial features. First is about delusion and mystification. It perpetrates a false or mistaken view of the world, what Engels referred to as false consciousness. Second, ideology is linked to the class system. Third, ideology is a manifestation of power. And finally, Marx treated ideology as a temporary phenomenon. For Marx, ideology will only continue so long as the class system that generates it survives. The Marxist theory of ideology was developed furthest by Antonio Gramsci. Gramsci argued that the capitalist class system is upheld not simply by unequal economic and political power, but by what he termed the hegemony of bourgeois ideas and theories. He highlighted the degree to which ideology is embedded at every level in society. in its art and literature, in its education and mass media, and in everyday language and pop culture. On the other hand, one of the earliest attempts to construct a non-Marxist concept of ideology was undertaken by Karl Mannheim, a German sociologist. In Ideology and Utopia, Mannheim portrayed ideologies as thought systems that serve to defend a particular social order and that broadly express the interests of its dominant or ruling group. He further distinguished between particular and total conceptions of ideology. Particular ideologies are the ideas and beliefs of specific individuals, groups, or parties, while total ideologies encompass worldview of a social class, society, or even historical period. In this sense, according to Haywood, Marxism, liberal capitalism, and Islamic fundamentalism can each be regarded as total ideologies. Moreover, all ideologies therefore have the following features. They offer an account of the existing order, usually in the form of a worldview, advance a model of desired future, a vision of the good society, and explain how political change can and should be brought about. This emphasizes that the complexity of ideology derives from the fact that it straddles the conventional boundaries between descriptive and normative thought, and between political theory and political practice. In short, it brings about two kinds of synthesis, between understanding and commitment, and between thought and action. In relation to our working definition as well, an ideology performs four functions. First is explanation. An ideology offers an explanation of why social, political, and economic conditions are as they are, particularly in times of crisis. Second is evaluation. The second function of ideology is to supply standards for evaluating social conditions. Whatever the position may be, it is clear that all ideologies provide standards or cues that help people assess, judge, and appraise social policies and conditions so that they can decide whether those policies are good, bad, or indifferent. The third is orientation. An ideology supplies its adherent with an orientation and a sense of identity of who he or he or she is, the group including race, nation, sex, and so on, to which he or she belongs, and how he or she is related to the rest of the world. The last function is political problem. An ideology tells its followers what to do and how to do it. It performs a programmatic or prescriptive function by setting out a general program of social and political action. Now that we have established the definition, the different perspectives across disciplines, the history, and its features and function, it is important that we note the distinguishing features of ideology from its similar concepts. First and foremost, political theory, by definition, is the study of concepts and principles that people use to describe, explain, and evaluate political events and institutions. Therefore, it is contemplative and concerned with long-range issues of principle. Thus, it is distinguished from ideology by its lack of a drive to power and self-realization. Ideology, by contrast, comes with a machinery of practice and with various levels of discourse. It differs from political theory in its need for the kind of certainty that can authorize real political decisions. Second, ideology is distinguished from culture in the sense that it is a thought or a collection of thoughts founded by a thinker or a person, while culture stems primarily from the plurality of ideas and people that belong to a specific community or society. However, as Gertz defined culture as a system of inherited conceptions expressed in symbolic forms by means of which men communicate, perpetuate, and develop their knowledge about and attitude towards life, ideology is in itself a part of culture. And based on Gert's definition as well, it overlaps with culture in the sense that both is seen as a symbolic system with a capacity to orient people in relation to their social worlds as the distinguishing element of ideology. Lastly, sometimes ideologies are spoken of as if they belong to the same logical category as religions. While both are in a certain sense of total systems, concerned with both questions of truth and questions of conduct, ideology is still distinguished from religion in the sense that a religious doctrine is constructed in terms of a divine order, whereas ideology, as we have established earlier, is founded by a thinker or a person. Although both may present a vision of a just society, a religious doctrine cannot easily provide a practical political program, just like ideology. Also, the emphasis of religion is on faith, and it aims for redemption or purification of human spirit, while ideology believes that it lives by reason.
So, right now, let's move on to the politics of ideology, which covers its aspects, features, dimensions, and types. This also exhibits the definition of political as well as politics. No matter how radical or ethical or liberal or revolutionary an ideology is, it has three major aspects. First, an ideology gives ideas and concepts in order to explain the existing reality. Second, an ideology offers a critique of the existing ideology. And third, it proposes a path forward. For example, a manifesto to be followed in order to achieve the desired goal in the future that has been identified by the ideology itself. Michael Hunt perceived ideology as an interrelated set of convictions or assumptions that reduces the complexities of a particular slice of reality to easily comprehensible terms and suggests appropriate ways of dealing with that reality. But in spite of these different versions of reality, there are certain common features in almost all the ideologies. Some of the features of ideology are provides worldview, help to structure how the world is understood and explained, a system of beliefs, normative values, attitudes, and symbols that guide collective action, advocates a particular pattern of social relationships and arrangements, justifies a particular pattern of conduct which its proponents seek to promote, realize, pursue, or maintain. Source for ordering, defining, and evaluating political reality, establishes political identities, gives meaning in identifying friends and foes in the international system, propels social machinery into action for change, provides or motivates a course of action, sometimes even a revolution to overthrow and replace the existing social order, presents or establishes a normative goal, what ought to be, as antithesis of present scenario and order's preferences. As one scholar stated, politics of modern world is shaped by key ideological traditions, and political ideologies are deeply rooted in modern cultures. They are difficult to manage and may be impossible for anyone to escape its impact, which gives rise to the dimensions of ideology. Ideology is a product of a wide range of factors, including core values, individual traits, fundamental beliefs, and environmental factors. Second dimension of ideology is that it provides certain interrelated concepts, ideas, and worldviews that seek to explain social realities nationally and internationally. Thirdly, ideological elements put some constraints on the choice of policy options. For example, under no circumstances the American foreign policy can be geared to promote socialism worldwide. Fourth, it produced newer literature on various dimensions of both the failed and successful ideologies, for it has always been subjected to fierce political debates. It has been charged with notions like ideas and ideologies are simply window dressing, used to conceal the deeper realities of political life. There are not just political ideologies, though they are most frequently studied and quoted in the academia. There are also ethical or moral ideologies, economic ideologies, religious ideologies, and regional ideologies. There are also non-Western, ethnic, regional, local, religious, national ideologies. Political ideologies are a concern of political scientists. Most familiar and established method of categorizing and relating them is the left-right spectrum. On a linear spectrum from left to right, the most accepted political ideologies are located as follows: communism, socialism, liberalism, conservatism, and fascism. Some of the most popular political ideologies are liberalism, conservatism, socialism, anarchism, communism, nationalism, democracy, environmentalism, feminism, Nazism, and fascism. There is no widely agreed upon definition of what is political. A definition that seems fruitful is to hold that political processes concern bridging power differences with society with those within the state. Bridges that carry inputs both from society to the state and from the state to society. Political ideologies are the shared framework of mental models that groups of individuals possess that provide both an interpretation of the environment and a prescription as to how the environment should be structured. The political is not social. Ever since Aristotle advanced the thesis that human beings are by nature political animals, there has been a tendency to fold the social into the political. The political is moral. A main reason a line should be drawn between the social and the political is that there are no political deliberations, decisions, or actions that do not contain a moral dimension. Even seemingly, merely technical decisions on closer examination very often turn out to have significant moral content or implications. The traditional notion of a single left-right dimension. This formulation of the left-right distinction and many others contain two interrelated aspects, namely, advocating versus resisting social change as opposed to decision, and B, rejecting versus accepting inequality. The political realm also includes intrastate but not intersocietal processes concerning the application, reallocation, and legitimation of power. Hence, if one adopts the suggested definition, one can speak about politics within a voluntary association or on a private college board only by the way of vague analogues because such talk confounds society and the state to the detriment of sound analysis and normative judgment. It is noteworthy that ideologies subordinate the national to the international and sometimes the international to the national. It depends on the ideology's orientation, whether it is inward looking or outward looking. The state now has to handle ideological communication, and that is only possible if it manages to secure a monopoly on a unifying political theory which becomes, or at least should become, a patrimony of beliefs, values, and cultural interpretations shared by all its members. A foreign policy theory as an individual's general ideology of how the international environment works and how governments should act within this international framework. A foreign policy theory should provide an individual with a lens on how he or she should perceive international events. Roles of ideology on politics. People have ideological beliefs, even if these beliefs are not very coherent. Ideological beliefs are beyond rational or scientific testing, whatever the claims of their proponents. Such beliefs perform a social role for those who hold them. Some critics argue that ideologies are simply instruments of power wielded by the dominant groups in the society. Another hostile opinion is that ideologies, especially restrictive ones, mentally enslave those who believe in them.
Hello, this is Migs, and now we will be putting some major ideologies on a continuum. We will only be discussing 7 major ideologies. On the far left side is collectivism, and on the far right is individualism. First, let us have a brief refresher on how these two are different. Collectivism is an ideology that emphasizes group dynamics over the individual. The goals of collectivist societies and organizations are communal, or for the group as a whole. They take pleasure when the group achieves something as one, and some of the values of collectivist cultures, like China and Japan, are obedience, interdependence, and cooperation. Individualism, on the other hand, focuses on the self rather than the group. Goals are primarily individualistic, and individualists take pleasure in individual achievement. Their values would include independence, assertiveness, and also competitiveness. Some examples of individualist cultures are the United States and Europe. For example, workers from collectivist cultures would value loyalty and service to a company, so they are likely to stay in one company for a long period of time. Also, they would retain their positions in which they can contribute the most to their company for a long time before getting promoted. On the other hand, employees from individualist companies would value management mobility more, so they are more likely to aim to go through the rungs of the company faster, and also they are more likely to go from company to company for their own self-actualization. Now, let us start plotting other major ideologies between these two. Next to individualism would be liberalism, so let us take it from the right. The term liberal has been used since the 14th century, but it has a variety of meanings. The Latin liber referred to a class of free men, and these were men who were neither serfs nor slaves. The term is often associated with freedom and choice, and the central theme of this ideology is a commitment to the individual and the desire to construct a society in which people can satisfy their interests and achieve fulfillment. An assumption is that the individual has reason, and the values and beliefs of liberalists would include individualism, freedom, reason, justice, and also toleration. To distinguish between classical and contemporary liberalism, the former is characterized by a belief in a minimal state that serves to maintain domestic order and personal security. Modern liberalism, conversely, upholds that the state should help individuals to help themselves. Classical liberalism originated from the Enlightenment, wherein liberals sought for a science of politics. Hobbes and Locke are often believed to have started this. Liberals thought that political ideas should no longer be based on religion and traditions, since they cause restrictions from individual freedom, outdated practices, and political absolutism. Instead, political, social, and economic thoughts should be based on reason. Contemporary liberalism originated from classical liberalism, when philosophers realized that the government could reduce liberty. Contemporary liberals believed that democratic governments should be strong enough to defend their citizens from whatever takes liberty from them, such as communism, fascism, and Nazism. And now let us move on to the next one, conservatism. Conservatism is defined by a desire to conserve, supported by resistance or suspicion to change. And there is a distinctive way in which this stance is upheld, such as support for tradition, a belief in human imperfection, and the attempt to maintain the organic structure of a society. Conservatives hold the following values: tradition, human imperfection, organic society, hierarchy and authority, and also property. Traditional conservatives argue that reason and science could not comprehend such matters as God, human spirituality, moral consciousness, and the intricate aspects of political communities. They believe that traditional understandings of ultimate reality, human nature, and society provided better guidance for governance than did science. Contemporary conservatives are characterized by a belief in a strong but minimal state. They also want more freedom in the marketplace and therefore less governmental intervention economically. Next, we will tackle socialism and communism. These are two different ideologies, although they are related and often confused with each other. The term socialist comes from the Latin sociare, which means to combine or to share. Socialism is defined by its opposition to capitalism and the attempt to provide a more human alternative. Its vision is that human beings are social creatures united by their common humanity. Socialists prefer cooperation over competition, and the defining value of socialism is equality, especially social equality. Its values would include community, cooperation, equality, class politics, and common ownership. It has a lot of divisions and even rival traditions. One division is communism, which was initially a vague future ideal of a free, equal, and cooperative society that would replace liberal regimes. It also transformed from a protest ideology into a governing one when Lenin declared himself as a Marxist. Here are the major differences between communism and socialism. In communism, economic distribution is according to people's needs, so everyone receives an equal share. The government owns all economic resources. It abolishes distinction, class distinction, and religion. While in socialism, economic distribution is appropriated according to a person's contribution to society, and individuals are allowed to have personal property, although industrial and production capacity is controlled by the government. Classes exist, yes, but differences are diminished, and freedom of religion is allowed. Now, we will be discussing one more major ideology, which is fascism. Fascism comes from the word fasces, meaning a bundle of rods with an axe blade protruding that signify the authority of magistrates in imperial Rome. Then in the 1890s, fascia was used to refer to a political group of revolutionary socialists. Fascismo got an ideological meaning when Mussolini used it to refer to the paramilitary armed squads he formed during and after World War One. The defining theme of fascism is an organically unified national community, embodied in a belief of strength through unity. The individual is believed to be nothing, so he must submit himself to his community and sacrifice himself to his nation or race without question. It is known for its anti-character, and its values would include anti-rationalism, struggle, leadership and elitism, socialism, and ultra-nationalism. One historical example of a world conflict that involved ideological differences would be the Holocaust. Adolf Hitler was a member of the Nazi Party, whose members blamed Marxists and Jews for the country's problems. Nazi ideology divided the world into races, and they believed that the Aryan race was superior to everyone, and that everyone else were inferior, and that Jews were an anti-race, evil, and destructive. They argued that the Aryans should rule the world. They wanted to have a perfect world, and on the contrary, it led to destruction and countless meaningless deaths, such as assassinations and the euthanasia program, wherein more than 200,000 mentally and physically handicapped Germans were killed. Some efforts from governments and organizations to diplomatically resolve this issue would include Pope Pius XII, who helped victims of the Nazis by directing his church to provide discreet aid. He maintained links to the German resistance and shared intelligence with the Allies. He addressed the issue in his speeches and even encouraged bishops to voice out their condemnation of the Nazi regime. Here are our references. And on behalf of our group, I would like to thank everyone for watching. Have fun studying and good luck.